Welcome to a deep dive into the world of Fernando Pessoa. We're going deep on this one. Looks like you want to get into like the real nitty-gritty. We've got
Yep.
Wikipedia articles,
Yeah.
literary journals, even some philosophical analysis. It's clear you're interested in not just his work, but his life and all the philosophy stuff that got him going.
It's great to see someone putting together this kind of deep dive. Having this range of materials is really going to help us get a full picture. And I think the connection you're drawing between his poetry and his philosophical, even mystical interests, that's really key here.
So Fernando Pessoa, he's become this like legend in the literary world, but for anyone who might be just getting to know him through this deep dive, how would you even begin to describe him?
Well, even calling him an individual is well, it's complicated, as we'll see. But Pessoa, born in Lisbon back in 1888, he lived this outwardly straightforward life. He was a commercial translator, but secretly he was writing, like constantly. He was so prolific, but no one really knew.
Secretly, huh? Okay, now you've got me intrigued. The sources mention he left behind this, like, treasure chest of writing. Over 25,000 pages. That's a whole other world hidden in a trunk. What was he doing with all of that stuff if he wasn't publishing it?
That question, that takes us right to, I think, the heart of Pessoa, the heteronyms. These weren't just, fake names. They were like complete alternate identities, each with their own unique voice, their style, their perspective. He even gave them astrological charts.
That's what gets me about Pessoa. It's like he had this whole cast of characters inside him, and they each represent this different side of his personality. It's like they're having this conversation with each other through his writing. Almost like he understood that the self isn't just one thing. It's made up of all these different voices.
Exactly. And it wasn't just in his head. He really inhabited these heteronyms. He let each one express themselves through a different style of writing, a style that showed their particular worldview. The three that stand out the most, Alberto Caeiro, Ricardo Reis, and Álvaro de Campos. They each offered this incredible window into, well, the many sides of Pessoa's inner world.
Okay, yeah, let's meet these core members of Pessoa's inner circle, right? Can you introduce us to these different sides of his, I don't know, his creative personality?
Let's start with Alberto Caeiro, the shepherd poet. Think of him as someone who finds these profound truths in the simplicity of nature. Someone who really questions the value of overthinking things. You can see it in Cairo's writing. It's stark, raw, and connected to the experience of just being.
I can get behind that. Finding truth in simplicity. It seems like the opposite of all the complex philosophical ideas Pessoa was exploring, though, right?
Exactly. And in contrast to Cairo, we have Ricardo Reis. He's a classical scholar. Reis, he embraces Stoicism, seize the day kind of thinking. And his writing, it reflects that classical influence, structured, formal, concerned with fate and acceptance.
Okay, so we have the rawness of Cairo and the structured stoicism of Reis. Just these two really paint this picture of what was going on inside Pessoa. So tell me about the third figure in this intriguing trio.
Álvaro de Campos, now he's a whole different story.
Yeah.
Completely different from Cairo and Reis.
Okay.
Like, imagine Whitman, but fascinated by modern life, all the energy and contradictions.
Wow, so Pessoa's got like this primal simplicity, a love of structure, and then boom, this fascination with everything new.
Exactly.
It's like he's debating the nature of reality in his own head using these heteronyms.
You're right on the mark there, because Pessoa was all about philosophy, particularly metaphysics. Those big questions about reality, spirit, and matter, the limits of what we can even understand.
And that's where those sources about his metaphysical interests come in, right?
Absolutely. It wasn't just some side hobby for him. It was fundamental to how he saw the world.
So were there any like schools of thought that particularly shaped his thinking?
Oh, definitely. He was drawn to those 19th century thinkers who took Darwin's ideas and applied them to philosophy.
Okay.
They believed that evolution wasn't just about biology, it was shaping consciousness and culture too.
Interesting.
And this really resonated with Pessoa because it gave him a way to understand the multiplicity he saw both within himself and in the world.
So he's seeing this constant evolution playing out not just in nature, but also in the human mind. And maybe the heteronyms were how he gave shape to that kind of dynamic, ever-changing inner world.
Precisely. And this brings us to something really fascinating. I noticed in your sources, Pessoa described his discovery of Cairo, the shepherd poet, as finding his own master.
Wow.
Remember, this is the same Pessoa who was deep into complex philosophical works, yet he found this profound wisdom in Cairo's simple observations of nature.
That's amazing. It's like he recognized a kind of pure directness in Cairo that he, as Pessoa the philosopher, felt like he was missing.
Right.
It makes me think about those times when we crave simplicity, when our own minds are just too much.
Absolutely. And this desire for a different way of being, a way to access something more primal and instinctive, well, it seems to have led Pessoa down another path, exploring mysticism.
Okay, now we're getting into some uncharted territory. The sources mention astrology, theosophy, even correspondence with Aleister Crowley. That's a whole other deep dive right there.
Indeed. And I think this wasn't separate from his philosophical pursuits, but rather another way for him to seek meaning. He was looking for a transcendent reality, something beyond logic and reason, something accessible through intuition, altered states of consciousness, maybe even magic.
It's wild to think that someone so intellectual, so dedicated to philosophy, was also drawn to these esoteric practices.
It shows you the depth of his curiosity, don't you think? And it challenges us to consider that maybe truth can be found in unexpected places. Sometimes we need both logic and intuition, intellect and imagination.
It makes you wonder, how did these mystical explorations actually show up in his work?
Yeah.
Do they directly influence his writing, or was it more of a personal thing?
Well, it's interesting because Pessoa actually claimed to experience automatic writing and even astral visions. For him, this wasn't just theory, it was real.
Well, hold on. Automatic writing, with the heteronyms, it's like, are these alternate selves, like, dictating their stories to him? Like he's just the channel for all these voices, real or imagined.
It's a fascinating idea, right? It really highlights how Pessoa blurred the lines between the self and something else, the conscious, the subconscious, the rational, and the mystical. And he used all of this to fuel his writing. It's why his work still feels so intriguing and so challenging today.
It's easy to get caught up in it all, the heteronyms, the philosophy, the mysticism. He's this larger-than-life figure. But I keep thinking he was wrestling with stuff we all deal with, right? Like, who am I? What does it all mean? What's my place in all of this?
Exactly, and that's why Pessoa still matters. His work makes us question what we think we know about ourselves. It encourages us to embrace all those different parts of ourselves and to accept that the search for meaning, it never really ends, does it?
This idea of embracing all the parts of ourselves, in a time when everyone's creating these perfect online personas, it's
Right.
like Pessoa was ahead of his time. Like he understood this fragmented way we experience identity now.
Absolutely. And beyond just identity, Pessoa's exploration of subjectivity, it pushes us to engage with the world from these multiple perspectives. His heteronyms each offer their own unique lens. He's challenging us to step outside our own limited viewpoints, to really sit with the complexity of being human.
So thinking about our own lives, what can we take away from all of this? What can we learn from this poet, philosopher, mystic who lived 100 years ago?
I think one of the most powerful lessons from Pessoa is the idea of embracing our own contradictions. Just like he gave a voice to all those inner parts of himself through the heteronyms, we can benefit from exploring all the different sides of ourselves. Our passions, our fears, our doubts, our dreams, it's all part of us.
So not trying to be some perfect, idealized version of ourselves. Instead, we should acknowledge, even celebrate all the different parts of who we are.
Exactly. And maybe when we embrace that complexity, that's when we find new ways to be creative, new ways of understanding the world, and ultimately a deeper connection with ourselves and with others.
But what we've uncovered has been really insightful. It's definitely made me think about identity, creativity, even reality itself in a whole new way.
It's been a pleasure exploring these ideas with you. And for you, listening, as you continue your own journey into the world of Pessoa, I'll leave you with this question. What would it look like for you to embrace your own heteronyms? What possibilities open up when we explore those hidden parts of ourselves?